Welcome to another episode of Business Acumen. Joe Mans here with Roy Browning. Today's question is pretty crazy, man. The bigger challenge, providing ROI or generating leads. What do you think?
Okay, so if we assume that we know everything about the person,
Sure.
I will still say it's going to be harder to generate leads because ROI is just ROI. You set what ROI is. So if you set the expectation. Now, meeting the objective is merely a matter of data. Did you meet the objective? Yes or no? What do you need to do to optimize to meet the objective? For example, if you have no traditional advertising at all, meaning TV, radio, print, you're only doing digital and you're not hitting your objectives, you can add in traditional elements as force multipliers, I've said this before, to get better results online.
Well, yeah, you can use force multipliers to get better results, but you have to spend more money. And when you're working within the confines of a set budget, it's not always feasible to scale up your efforts in order to reach a particular return. I mean, it narrows down to the return versus every dollar spent. Sometimes you don't have the luxury to scale that up in order to get those returns. Sometimes you have to say, my budget is X, we cannot exceed X. And when you get into a campaign, despite your best efforts of planning, despite the best research knowledge and data that you have available, proving that ROI can be a challenge, especially when there's so many unknown variables when you get into it. But I'm going to agree with you on the lead generating piece too. That is certainly a challenge. You just never know what's going to happen. You cannot anticipate what someone is going to do in response to your efforts. So I'm going to say that proving ROI is easier than generating leads. So it sounds like we both agree on this topic.
Yeah, the one issue is that if you're not meeting your ROI objectives, you will never meet your lead gen objectives.
I think one feeds the other.
They do.
Sure.
They do. I mean, it's a different part of the funnel. So we're comparing top of the funnel versus bottom of the funnel. Any kind of conversion, whether that's a lead form or whether that's somebody buying something. If your goal is to have 10 people buy your product and you don't get enough impressions, you don't get enough click-through rates, you don't get enough traction on your webpage, you're never going to get enough sales.
Well, I think this is where people confuse ROI with KPIs.
Well,
the click-through rate could be your KPI. If enough people click the impressions that are served, it's going to set the pendulum in motion that's going to generate a lead somewhere down the road. But initially, I think it's a challenge when you start to put impressions or clicks as your actual ROI, because a click does not return an investment unless the objective is awareness. If it's top funnel, I think you could start there. But if your return on investment is going to be defined by the number of leads that are generated, they definitely work hand in hand. Therefore, lead generation and ROI are going to be equally complicated because they're the exact same thing.
Yeah. Well, let me give some tactical advice, right? There are 3 distinct areas in a campaign that are going to have measurements. So you're going to have your creative. Is your creative effective? If people are not clicking on your ads or taking the action in your ads, that means that your creative needs to change. That might just be changing the color of the button from green to blue, or it might be making it an easier phone number, something like that. If people are clicking on your ad, chances are your creative is doing great. Something is happening next. And so when you're distributing your ad, maybe you're distributing it to the wrong people. So if you have, oh my goodness, 100-time click-through rate higher than you were expecting, but nobody's buying anything, then you're probably talking to people who are interested, but are not the right audience to buy your product. So we have creative, we have the distribution to the right people, and then your landing page is the final element. If the landing page does not work to convert, if it doesn't have a clear call to action, if it doesn't have enough information to get somebody to buy that product that you want or to fill out that lead form, or maybe the lead form is too long, 75 items just to get on their email list, then that landing page is too long. So if at the end of it all, if you look at those 3 things, is my creative good, is my distribution good, and is my landing page good? If all 3 are good, then I think you won't have any issues meeting your ROI goals and meeting your lead gen goals.
That's very well said, Roy. So it sounds like we both agree on this topic. We'd love to hear your comments, your feedback. Do you agree with us? Is there something that we missed? Or maybe you disagree with us completely and you'd like to submit your opinion. We'd love to hear it either way. In the comments below, go ahead and like this video, comment, subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching Business Acumen. Okay, folks, we're here to sum it up with lead generation versus ROI. Anytime that you're generating leads, it's important that you use the right tactics to bring the audience into a conversion. It's not going to be much of a challenge if you can do that. When it turns into ROI, just make sure that you benchmark what that ROI is, and then you'll know what you're heading towards and how to achieve those goals. But always look at the right tactics in order to determine your ROI and to generate those leads.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's all about the expectation. What do you expect to get from it? And you have to define it beforehand. If you wait until the campaign is over, you're going to be scratching your head asking yourself the question of whether it was successful or not. But if you set the benchmark up front, you'll be good.
And that's how we sum it up.
All right, time for the Q&A. All right, so the first one we have Kevin wants to know who determines the ROI, the advertiser, the ad analytics, or the company sales metric. Joe, what do you got, man?
I think ROI has to be determined by who's in charge of the money.
Yes.
So it's, I mean, if I'm spending the money, I'm going to want to know what I can expect in return. And so I will say this, though, the advertising agency or the marketing department can help set that. Oftentimes in a consulting relationship, when a client comes to me and says, here's my budget, I ask them how many widgets do they need to sell in exchange for the budget that they have. They tell me, and that's how we start to determine ROI. That can come from the sales team, it can come from the analytics, it can come from the marketing team, but at the end of the day, how many widgets do you need to sell in exchange for the budget you have?
Yeah, and the only other piece there is, depending if you're not selling something directly, like how much is brand engagement worth to you, or how much is brand awareness worth to you. So if 10,000 more people know about your product and they're more likely to buy tomorrow, predetermining whatever that value is.
Of course.
Yeah. And then Doug wants to know if my investment into something like influencers for marketing campaign is my time, what is a realistic return I can look for? And the same thing's true about their time. What is their time worth?
Yeah, I think that you got to look at the influencers, and this is on a scale of anything. I look at an influencer's bill kind of like I do an advertising bill. What is the value of a billboard? What is the value of a TV spot? How much is the advertising company asking me in exchange for renting that space? And it's the same thing when renting the influencer's time, and then determining what the ROI is going to be in exchange for that time or in exchange for that bill. So it's really just a matter of calculating ROI, an influencer with a greater reach, with a larger following or larger audience to reach, and how much their influence impacts that audience is going to have a lot to determine the value of that spend. And it's just the same metrics as you would use with any other advertising platform.
Yeah, I think of it a lot like I think of radio. How much reach does that influencer have? Do they have 700,000 followers or do they have 100,000 followers? That's going to make a difference, and their rate's going to be different depending on how many followers they have. The other key piece there is how likely are their followers to take the action from them. So some influencers may talk a lot about different advertising, but if it doesn't convert, then it's really not worth the time. So a little bit of research goes a long way with that. But the influencers are going to have pretty detailed information when you're going to buy their services about how much they charge per episode or per hour, and they'll have their reach included.
Sounds great.
Awesome. Well, if you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comment section below, and we're excited to meet you at the top. To learn more, follow us online at summitup.biz. If you found value in this podcast, please leave us a review. See you next time.